Natan Sharansky was born in Ukraine and after getting his degree in Moscow became deeply involved in the struggle of Soviet Jews to emigrate to Israel. After 9 years of imprisonment for just that, he finally made his way to Israel in 1986. There, he started a long career fighting for Soviet Jews, serving in several Israeli governments and serving as chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel. I could go on, but in the interest of actually getting to talk, Natan, thank you so much for being here with us on this really historic day.
Thank you, and I'm really excited. The one who for 50 years is dealing with anti-Semitism, facing anti-Semitism, then fighting anti-Semitism, looking for the allies all over the world, to see this conference, to see how the Muslim world, Muslim countries are joining this struggle, that's really is extremely optimistic side.
Well, I mean, let's start.
Thank you, everybody who organized this conference.
Let's start also with your personal story. It is quite an incredible one, and I'm curious how that story, your own heritage, affected how you see the problem and the challenge of anti-Semitism today in 2020.
Well, you know, I grew up in the Soviet Union under communist dictatorship. The senior citizens of Albania definitely know what it means. And so first of all, I faced this desperate attempt of the regime to disconnect Jews from their heritage, from their faith, from their culture, and of course from the state of Israel. But I also saw how it starts from Jews but never finishes with the Jews, how the persecution of Jews then turns into persecution of practically all the people who insist on their identity, who insist to be different than communist ideology demands from them to be. And that made me sure that the struggle against anti-Semitism is the struggle in the interest of all the people of the world. And later, when unfortunately it was so sad to find out that in the free world, you can suddenly see the return of old anti-Semitism and the emerging of the new anti-Semitism. That was very alarming. And I really traveled over more than 100 campuses in the United States of America and many countries. And then I came with this idea that we really must have a clear definition which connects all the new anti-Semitism. And I'm glad that today it's an international definition. And Albania, that's really historic event, joins the countries who define anti-Semitism and fight anti-Semitism.
Well, Natan, we have a lot of questions from viewers for you, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. Let's start with the first one from Israel.
Tamara Behrens in Israel. You've spoken about how college and university campuses are the greatest incubators of anti-Semitism today. Given that the students of today will be the next generation of leaders, how do we ensure that they won't be anti-Semitic?
Well, thank you. Great question. Well, first of all, how to make sure that they will not be anti-Semitic? First of all, they have to know the history, have to know the tragedy of Holocaust. It sounds obvious, but there are more and more people who simply don't know anything and don't want to know anything. I have to say from personal experience, from experience of my daughters, remember, there is no replacement from going to these places of Holocaust, going to Auschwitz, going to Babi Yar, to face this awful tragedy. And then it stays with you. Then you understand how easy and quick can be this change from the life that you enjoy to this awful phenomena of killing the whole people. And the second, you have really to be sensitive to the fact that anti-Semitism is a plastic thing. Here was said many times, it can go after the race, it can go after the religion, it can go after the today's expression of Jewishness, the collective Jew, is the state of Israel. And that's why it is so important that now there is a definition, because demonization of Israel, the legitimization of Israel, applying to Israel double standard, that's exactly what anti-Semites were doing to Jews, and today are doing to Israel. And the moment you see this connection, it is very easy to separate between the legitimate criticism of Israel, and everybody has to feel himself or herself absolutely free to express any disagreement. But to see where the line is crossed, between legitimate criticism, between discussion of differences, and between your attempt to demonize Israel or to apply to Israel standards which you never apply to any other country. And if this is clear in the heads of these leaders, they will not be anti-Semites.
Yeah, walking that fine line is certainly something that nations around the world and communities are trying to deal with. And let's just bring in one final question, this one from Romy in New York.
Hi, my name is Romy Ronan, and I'm a student at Columbia University. As a young student activist advocating against anti-Semitism, I face an uphill battle in ensuring that my voice was heard and in getting other students involved and to care about these issues. What advice would you give to a young activist like me in our new generation of combating anti-Semitism?
Well, first of all, I encourage you to continue this very important battle. Second, Elie Wiesel was saying that anti-Semitism starts with the Jews but never finishes with Jews. That's exactly what you and your friends on the campus have to remember, that anti-Semitism is something what is threatening to all the people. That's the beginning of racism. That's the beginning of the hatred towards the others. And one more thing, very important in the universities. Everybody fights for human rights. Everybody believes in human rights. Everybody loves human rights. And today, very often, human rights banner is hijacked by the anti-Semites. They are trying to say that the real feminist cannot be Zionist, or the one who is for the rights of LGBTs, he cannot be Zionist. And we just now saw here the facts brought to this conference. And you have always stick to the facts and to remember and to remind everybody, and first of all to yourself, that if you are really for human rights, for the democracy, look what is happening with human rights in Israel, what is happening with the rights of women in Israel, and then challenge these lies of those who really believe in human rights. I was many times facing the demonstrations for the rights for Palestinians against me. I was saying, I am ready to join your demonstration for the real freedom of Palestinians, for the real rights of women and all the others in Palestine. But the moment you unmask this hypocrisy of saying that Zionism is against human rights, the moment you show that the real picture of the world is absolutely opposite, you can get many friends. And you can build the real front of solidarity against anti-Semitism.